August 1998. Lee, Greater Manchester. Two masked men with gleaming samurai swords smashed their way into a house in a quiet Manchester suburb. The shocked occupants scramble to get away, but one trips and falls and is mercilessly beaten and slashed. One of his arms is nearly severed right through, and despite his pleas for mercy, he's left in a bloody mess. But who were the attackers, and why was an innocent man targeted? Paul Masseys, Mr. Salford, was much lauded as the face of Manchester's underworld before his tragic demise. But he was only one cog in a dangerous wheel, with various factions fighting it out for their corner of the lucrative drug market. Massey himself admits being shot at by rival gangsters from Salford, who were displeased with him attempting to dictate the rules on the streets that aspiring Salford dealers had to abide by.
Dave just thought he was going to walk up, pull the trigger, and them guys was all going to drop dead like in a film. Didn't even hit anyone. You understand? Because it's not how you think it is when you go out to do that. People don't just die that easy. I know people who've been shot in the head and still today alive. I know people who've been shot in the body and it's come out the other side. Large calibre bullets still sat around today. I know a kid gun put in his eye, trigger fired and beat with an ammo. Still around today. I know a kid who got shot through the neck. The bullet went come out this side, went in his friend's head and come out his mate's head here. And they're both still alive, you know.
Massey was at the height of his powers in the late 90s, when he was caught up in the hubris of being filmed for a documentary and got into an altercation with a coachload of revellers. One of these men was stabbed in the leg, which hit an artery, and the notorious Salford face went on the run abroad. In 1999, he was apprehended and brought to the courts to hear his fate. Even though the victim conveniently lost his memory, Massey was sentenced to 14 years and a further 2 years for threatening to kill officers. In another courtroom in the same year, an up-and-coming villain, a few years Massey's junior, was also up in court fighting conspiracy to murder charges, accusing him of slicing a man's arm off with a samurai sword in a home invasion. His name was Vincent Clay. He was described in the book Gangsters by Peter Walsh as a 6'4" fighting machine. Many notorious hard men have come out of Manchester and Salford. Graham Boardman, for example, a demonic doorman whose good looks and posh voice hid a monstrous temper that could explode into bloody violence in a heartbeat. Boardman went missing after a bad-tempered dispute over stolen drugs with a crime lord capable of truly gut-wrenching violence. As dangerous as Boardman was, he was no match for his alleged global crime lord nemesis. It is not factually known what happened to Boardman, but the police believe him to be dead. Within the underworld, the belief is that he was tortured to death in a truly horrific end to his life. Graham Boardman and Vincent Clay had a mutual friend who also had a big reputation in Manchester and was known to be one of the best fighters in the city. Paul Doyle once had a street fight with the notorious Damien Noonan, which saw two of the big hitters in the city scrap it out in front of Massey, Boardman and others. Doyle, a Salford legend, was once good friends with Paul Masseys and Graham Boardman's business partner and best friend. The feud with the crime lord was also blighting Doyle's life with death threats looming over his head. He wanted to signal to the feared gangster that he would not be an easy target and arranged for his Manchester United hooligan pals to turn out for him in big numbers as a show of force. Vinny Clay and his pal turned up for the day out, and during the get-together, the group of lunatics attacked a nightclub door team who had humiliated one of their number a few weeks before. According to Doyle, Clay and his friend were at the forefront smashing the doorman and clubbed to pieces until he persuaded them to make a quick getaway before the police arrived. Clay was no stranger to violence by that point. He had been remanded for wounding after battering 3 men and driving without a licence. It was the start of a reputation that had one enemy call him a psychopath in a later court trial. In the book Gangland, it describes Clay when exploring the new breed of Salford gangsters and says, "One was Vinny Clay, a 6'4" terror who scared everyone. He once walked into a pub, put a gun on the bar, loaded it, and fired into the roof, for no particular reason. Clay and his mates were suspected of being behind a string of violent incidents, including one in which a policeman was hit over the head, the rake. On another occasion, an officer turned up to deal with a dispute in a chip shop on Langworthy Road. He parked his patrol car and went inside. Clay appeared with a chainsaw and sliced off the car roof. "I like Vinny, he was a character," said Paul Doyle. In July 1999, Vincent Clay and his co-defendant, Bernard Cleary, stood accused of conspiracy to murder Mark Ashcroft and attempting to murder Louis Makin, who had his right arm severed and later amputated in the attack. Prosecutor Clement Goldstone QC claimed Makin was lucky to be alive after the attack. It was claimed by Goldstone and the prosecution that Cleary, Clay, and other henchmen had been attempting to get dealers to sell their illicit drugs for them, but were turned down to their allegiances to Mark Ashcroft. They forced some smack addicts to give them the address, and that is when it was arranged for two men, allegedly Clayton and Cleary, to mask up and pay the man a visit. Unfortunately for Louis Makin, who was completely innocent and just visiting a friend, he was left traumatized with a badly severed arm. Due to complications, the arm had to be later amputated to stop a deadly infection spreading. Despite the prosecution attempting to persuade the jury that cell phone evidence put Cleary and Clayton in the area, at the time there was no real evidence against the two men, and both were acquitted of the attempted murder and conspiracy to murder. Cleary was sentenced to 6 years for drug dealing, but for the family of Makin, it left serious unanswered questions from the police. Their son had been left in a terrible state physically and mentally, with no one to be punished. Vinny Clay was to end up in prison shortly after this case, remanded over separate drug charges. Whilst imprisoned at HMP Forest Bank, Manchester, Clay allegedly led a 60-strong riot, as reported in the Bolton News. The riot came just 1 month after Princess Anne had officially opened a privately run jail, dubbed a prison for the 21st century. Rioters, wearing pillowcases as hoods, seized control of their wing before targeting other inmates, including a notorious child killer. Cells were set on fire and furniture smashed up, causing damage of £100,000. The wing at the Category B jail could not be used for 19 days. It came as inmates protested over the breakdown of their telephone system. Prosecutor at the time, Andrew O'Byrne, told Manchester's Minshull Street Crown Court. The inmates embarked upon an orgy of vandalism. Some of them set fires on the wing and threw burning items out of the windows into the yard below. They managed to tear a steel staircase and handrail from its mountings and used it as a battering ram to open cell doors. It was alleged that the towering Vincent Clay was the ringleader of the uprising. Police reinforcements from as far away as Liverpool were called in to secure the perimeter of the jail as the rioters rampaged through the wing. Eventually, inmates surrendered and were removed one at a time from the wing to be relocated to other parts of the prison. The premature and tragic end to Vincent Clay's life would ironically happen as he was on bail for the prison riot offence. If he had remained behind bars, there was every chance he would be still alive. As is often the case with these types of deadly disputes, it arose from something relatively minor. It is alleged Clay had taken a car from some younger gang members in his area of Salford. Clay had a fearful reputation, so met little resistance, but it allegedly fueled bad feeling towards the giant fighting machine. According to subsequent court reports, whilst Clay was in prison, the lads forcefully took back the car from Vinny's girlfriend. This infuriated Clay, and on release there was bad blood and threats going back and forth. November 2000, Vincent Clay was talking to his girlfriend on Amersham Street, Salford, when two gunmen approached and opened fire as Clay tried to flee. It was a merciless execution, leaving no doubt that they would kill him as they caught him in the head and chest. Mr. Conrad QC, who would later attempt to prosecute one of the alleged killers, said it was a swift and brutal death. A post-mortem showed 5 gunshot wounds, 1 to the head, 2 to the chest, 1 in the pelvis, and another in the leg. The man subsequently arrested for Clay's murder described Vincent Clay as a psychopath and admitted he was frightened of him due to his reputation. In similar circumstances to the samurai sword case, a year earlier, the accused attacker was cleared as there was not enough evidence to proceed with the case. Paul Massey, Graham Boardman, and Vincent Clay go down in Salford folklore as 3 men cruelly taken before it was their rightful time. The Harman reputation is a poisoned chalice, and you need look no further than across the UK with names such as Viv Graham, Lee Duffy, Desi Noonan, to name just a few, who were also brutally dispatched. Such is the merciless law of the underworld. As we remember characters from British criminal history, it is always worth remembering that the dark underbelly of society almost always ends in tragedy for those involved. The victims and the families are left to pick the pieces of broken families littered across the country. As tempting as the rewards are, and although many feel they have no choice but to be sucked into this deadly world, there is always a smarter choice. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the content. Please leave comments, which I always enjoy reading. The Inquirer out.